Hello folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero August 2022 kit. This month we are going to the Great American Southwest with this great set of 4 stencils, layering stencils. So stencil 1, so we obviously have some mountains and buttes and cactuses. 2, I guess this would be 2, 3, and 4. There's our 4 stencils. These are all noted in the bottom here. This is A, B, C, and D, our 4 Southwestern Vista stencils. I don't know if anybody realizes this, but I actually lived in Phoenix, Arizona for 7 years. Phoenix, Arizona. After college, I was in Phoenix, Arizona for 7 years, and then I moved to New York straight from there. Those are our stencils. We do get a 3x4-inch stamp set. This is just basically a sentiment stamp set. Adventure awaits, have a safe journey, I miss you, good luck. Lots of usable sentiments, not only on a Vista card like this, but for regular cards as well. You are my Oasis. I like that one. We have 6 frame cuts. Of course, this large one will cut out the mountain vista. And then looks like we've got 5 that will cut out the various cactus. Of course, we also get some ink cubes. Well, usually when they give us a stencil set, they'll give us a set of ink cubes. These are in the Hero Arts new Core Ink line. We've got pine, caramel, sand, and tangerine. The Hero Hues Core Inks. And we also get a pot of Pearl X Super Bronze. Pearl X Super Bronze. I believe this is seems to be basically like perfect pearls, although I keep hearing that there is no binder in this. So if you do use this Super Bronze Pearl X powder, you should actually seal your artwork. Hairspray works easily for that. Pearl X powder, we can give that a try. And also 5 sheets of Luxe White Watercolor cardstock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5.5 by 8.5. So that's everything in our kit this month. We are headed to the American Southwest. We'll see just how far I can push these stencils. Happy trails! And here we have my 10 cards for this month, August 2022. All white card bases, no special sizes or fancy anythings. Again, we have what feels like a kind of a limited kit. Now, thankfully, there are frame cuts for all of those cactus, so we've got those to use. But the stamp set is only sentiments. Lots of sentiments, but only sentiments. So I figured I'd start by putting these stencils and these ink cubes to the test. Our first card is You Are My Oasis. On a piece of the watercolor paper from the kit, I stenciled layer A with the sand ink cube, layer B, which is the darker shadows, with the caramel ink cube, layer C with the pine for the cactus, and the tangerine for the sun. And then I went back for layer D, the detail on the cactus, and did that with the caramel ink. It's a really, really nice southwestern scene there. The stencils line up quite easily. The vista is actually quite eye-catching. This does leave us with kind of a white sky. I did this, of course, on a piece of white cardstock, and that leaves us with a white sky and some white washes through the desert here. I wondered if I could possibly bring in my little Pebbles chalks and see if I can't give a little bit of color to those areas. Now, we have that one Oasis sentiment, so I thought I'd look at possibly creating some water in these blank spaces. So this is just the very, very light blue. I'll just dab that color in there around the stamped images, and then I'll go in and try and smooth it out a bit. But this is just with the little pouncing balls, little cotton balls, seems like. Now, the nice part, if you get some blue where you don't want it to go, you can take an eraser and remove some of that. But the color is really so soft that it almost doesn't matter. See, there's a little bit right there that you might want to clear away from the sand. I could do that same on the bottom here too then. Just a simple eraser will help remove that extra chalk. And there we go. Just a little chalk takes care of all of those white spaces that were left from the stencil. I like that. I stamped the sentiment using Hero Hue's Root Beer Reactive Ink and embossed that with some clear embossing powder. I die cut the panel with the next to the largest size of the Hero Arts rectangle infinity dies, and I glued that down to a white card base. Basically, this is just a one-layer card. I think that wash of blue provides a good justification for this sentiment. Now, okay, so here's my bugaboo. Now, saguaro cactuses, which are these cactus with the arms, they only grow in the Sonoran Desert, which is in southern Arizona. But this scene reminds me more of Monument Valley, which is actually in Utah. I think Arizona has more of a tendency towards mesas, and Monument Valley has these big, tall buttes. I think I've realized that these are actually the first cactus image stamps or stencils I have in my set. You are my oasis, my river of blue. So in an effort to avoid those patches of white sky and landscape, I thought we might get away with stenciling this scene on some very light blue cardstock. This instance, I used Hero Hue's Arctic cardstock, and we've got the Wish You Were Here. I used the same inks on this card in the same order, and I like how the blue cardstock darkens all those inks, making for a little bit more of a dramatic presentation than that first card, which is, of course, inked on white. The sentiment is stamped and embossed just the same as the first card. The panels die cut as well and glued down to a white card base. This is a really easy way to avoid the white spaces and give yourself some background colors with no effort whatsoever. I bet craft cardstock would be an interesting background color for these stencils as well. Now, of course, our kit comes with a fancy die that cuts out the sky from the buttes, and you can stencil the sun and clouds on a different background. But I was interested in something maybe a little bit more radical and ultimately very simple. And we have Adventure Awaits. Look at that. Nice shine on that card. I used embossing and watermark ink through the stencil layer A on some Hero Arts pitch black cardstock and covered all of that sticky ink with the Bronze Pearl X powder. Now remember, there's no binder in this powder, so you do need to seal it with some hairspray or fixative to make it permanent. Now I die cut the buttes before I had set my powder, so I lost a little bronzing to my die cutting plates. It washes off really easily, but then I actually kind of like the texture that it left me with. Then I sealed it. I die cut a background panel 4 inches by 5 1/4 and covered the top of that with some Alta New Galaxy wide washi tape and glued that down to a card base. Love that washi tape for instant Galaxy backgrounds. I trimmed the sides of the die cut buttes. The die cuts it at 4 1/8 of an inch. I trimmed that down to 4 inches and attached it to the card front with thin foam tape around the edges of the buttes and liquid glue on the bottom. I embossed the sentiment on a scrap of pitch black cardstock using Copper Rose Love from Lizzie embossing powder, a really nice match to that bronze Pearl X. And I die cut that with a Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment Banners die and attached that to the card front with more foam tape. Very striking and very easy. I really love the silhouettes of all the cacti. Adventure awaits! Now, of course, when we get a stencil or a die or a stamp that has a particular orientation to it, of course, our stencils are very portrait-oriented. I always want to try to see if I could use it in the other orientation, i.e. a landscape orientation. Some creative mask cutting was involved with this, but I think it works. We've got Good Luck, I Believe in You, with a landscape vista. I really like this one. I reached for my Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks for this card. I used antique linen for layer A, frayed burlap for layer B, peeled paint for layer C, and back to the frayed burlap for the detail on the cactus. The stencil ends over here on the right under the in there. So after I finished the stenciling on the left, I took a piece of masking paper and just laid it over the right side of the card and sketched out the following buttes and the little wash there in the center. Cut that out with my craft knife, peeled those pieces away, and then ink blended inside those spaces. Then I added one more piece of masking paper over the top of that and sketched in all of the contour lines in our added buttes over here. I got really nice match there. I'm very proud of that. I cut those out with my craft knife and then again went back in and stenciled those with the frayed burlap ink. That all came out really nicely. I was very pleased, except I had a definite seam right here down the middle where that stencil ended and my new stencil part began. So I just stenciled in another cactus, one of those big saguaro cactuses. I stenciled that in right over the seam, used lots of ink on that, but it worked really well, covered up that seam quite nicely. I went ahead and added an extra one of the little aloe cactus over here, and we came up with a really nice landscape vista of Monument Valley, right on the edge of Arizona. I did stencil the sun with the tangerine ink from the kit, and then I die cut a piece of masking paper and put that over the top of it. It was a little bit larger, so I thought that would be okay, give us a little bit of a corona on the sun, but I put the masking over that, and then I took some Hero Hues Splash Reactive ink and inked in the top sky, keeping away from the edge of the buttes there, but gave most of the sky the color using the Splash Reactive ink. I did go back to my Pebbles chalk palette to add the little yellow wash through the center here, little purpley brown over here. But then once I took that mask off from the sun, I just went back in with that tangerine blending brush and blended it out a little more. It's not a stark white ring. It actually looks like a nice desert sun. I like that little ring around that. I stamped and embossed the sentiments. There's two sentiments there with the root beer reactive ink and clear embossing powder. I added the birds. They're actually from the My Monthly Hero April 2019 Venice kit to camouflage a little inking blush over here. That adds a really nice touch of life to this landscape. Good Luck, I Believe in You. I really like that this orientation gets rid of most of that lower unadorned portion of the stencil. And this landscape view actually feels a lot more expansive. Now there's a vista for you. Good luck. I believe in you. Now, since we got some Luxe watercolor paper in our kit, I thought it was only appropriate for me to try and do an actual watercolor vista card here. So for card number 5, we have an I Miss You watercolor card. Since I'm not relying on the stencils, I can do just about anything I want. I die cut a piece of that watercolor paper with the buttes die, and then of course realized that the opposite or the top half of that would actually work for a second layer of buttes. So that's what I did. I cut one piece of watercolor paper and I'm using both sides of it. Gives us a fun multi-layer vista there. And I didn't have to include any cactus. I painted both of the die cut layers with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, shooting for a loose watercolory feel. That Luxe White watercolor paper holds up well to a good deal of water. Now, I cut a background panel to 4 by 5 1/4, and I ink blended the sky with Creamsicle, Fruit Punch, and Purple Galaxy reactive inks, and I glued that down to a white card base. I dug out this Adirondack chair stamp from the My Monthly Hero June 2018 kit. Oh boy, that's really going back there. Here you go. There's that lovely chair stamp right there. And I stamped 2 of them here with the Root Beer reactive ink and then added a touch of a shadow under them with the markers. The sentiment is stamped and embossed, root beer and clear embossing powder. I attached both layers to the card front with thin foam tape along their top edges and liquid glue along their bottom edges, so there's some dimension where they overlap at the top, but not on the bottom. This is so completely different from the stenciling, and I like it. I think the watercolor is very appropriate for a southwestern vista. And the 2 little Adirondack chairs certainly drive home this sentiment. This is a great way to expand on the design possibilities of this kit. Don't stencil at all. So having no cacti on this card got me to thinking, I wondered if I could just outline the stencils and kind of create a color by numbers type of image or something. Would I be able to excise the cacti just by not outlining that part of the stencil? So that gives us our next card here. We've got Be Wild and Free, Have a Safe Journey, looking at our vista through a window. And here's yet another way we can use these stencils. I outlined the stencils using a .05 Pigma Micron pen, and I avoided all of the essentially vertical lines of the cacti and connected the contour lines where the cactus once stood. I really like that look. It does look like a page from a coloring book, actually. I grabbed my Tombow markers to color this image, but I have to admit that the bottom half of our vista got a little boring with no cactus or plant life down there. So I decided to get rid of the boring part of that by limiting our view through a window. Now, I don't have a specific window die, so I created this window opening using 3 Hero Arts Square Infinity dies. The window is 3 3/4 inches square, and the panes are 1.5 inches square. Of course, that frame there is then 3 3/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. That gives us the frame around the window. I trimmed the colored background to fit behind the window and glued those to a white card base. I stamped the sentiments using intense black ink. Of course, since there's black outlines, I can use black and emboss those with some clear embossing powder as well. At first glance, you hardly notice the outlines, but I do think that gives this card a fun coloring book or paint by number quality. And no cacti. So having this fancy die for the buttes lends itself to a classic easel card. Our next card here is a nighttime card, wishing you all of the best. That makes a great easel card. Just like that. On pitch black cardstock, I used some Distress Oxide inks again. I used Antique Linen for layer A. Then I used Hero Arts Unicorn White ink for layer B. That gave us a nice highlight instead of a shadow. I really like that for this nighttime scene. I used Bundled Sage for the cactus and then Walnut Stain for the lines on the cactus. I thought those colors worked great for a real desaturated nighttime feel. I die cut the buttes and trimmed a top folding card base to 4 1/8 inch wide, matching the width of the die cut. I stamped the sentiment using Unicorn White ink and embossed that with some white detail embossing powder. Works so well. And then I added some Altenew Watercolor Nebula wide washi tape to the top 2/3 of the card base. I scored and folded the bottom of the front at 2 3/8 inches to make the easel. I glued the buttes to the bottom of the card front. I stamped the inside sentiment using intense black ink and embossed it with clear embossing powder. I trimmed it to size, added another piece of cardstock behind that, glued that down inside the card at a place to hold our easel. Again, that wide washi tape from Altenew is great for beautiful nighttime backgrounds in no time at all. This is a very fun, really pretty, I like that nighttime look easel card. Wishing you all the best. Bon voyage. I do try my best to use all of the stamps in our kits. This brings the number of sentiments I've used to 10 out of 13. I think that's pretty darn good. Okay, enough with the sentiments. I think it's time for some puns. Of course, there's lots of cactus puns out there. I hope these are a little less familiar to you. Our next card is a Valentine card. You prickle my fancy. Now, I did stencil a set of the cacti using the pine and caramel inks included in the kit and die cut them all. I also added a little sparkle to them with a gold gel pen tracing their contours. There you go. I think you can see the gold in their contours. That added a nice touch of sparkle without making it too glittery. I started poking around my stamps for a flower pot that might work with this when I realized that the planter shouldn't have a black outline because the cactus don't have black outlines. So I decided to just draw a pot using my zig markers, and I fussy cut it out, leaving a little matching white border around the edges. I arranged the 3 cactus in the pot and glued them all together. I printed this sentiment on a white card base using my Silhouette software, and that's the Brady Bunch remastered font, one of my favorite comic fonts. You prickle my fancy. And I thought we'd leave a little bit more of a background to help reinforce the Valentine aspect of this card. So I lightly stenciled a heart on the card front using Tattered Rose Distress Oxide ink. I don't own a heart stencil, so I made my own using a Hero Arts Nesting Heart Infinity die on a scrap of white cardstock. Stencil that on the card front. That adds some nice color to the background and supports the theme as well. A little heart back there. For a final touch, I die cut this tiny, tiny bloom from a Dress My Crafts mini daisy die set and added that to the hedgehog cactus. I think that's what that is. It might be a prickly pear. It seems rounder than a prickly pear, which is more flat, I think of. Anyway, a tiny drop of Hero Arts pink lacquer pen in the center of the flower for a little touch of detail. I'm really pleased that I actually have some nice cactus images in my stash now. You prickle my fancy. And so on we go with the puns here. Card number 9 is Cactus Makes Perfect. There's a pun I bet you haven't heard of. Cactus Makes Perfect, with a nice lineup of our big saguaro cactus here. I stenciled the saguaro on the front of a white card base with the pine and caramel inks. And of course, I just flipped the stencil and did it from the back for cacti number 2 and 4 here. So they're going back and forth. I did have to make sure I cleaned the stencil every time I flipped it back and forth, but I got a pretty clean image overall. I printed the sentiment again using the Brady Bunch remastered font, and then created this little blue ribbon with 2 of the mini daisy die cuts. This is one of those little mini daisy die cuts. Really comes in handy. I just got those a little while ago. I did 2 of those glued together, a circle punch glued on top, and a couple of fussy cut tails to make our little blue ribbon here. Cactus Makes Perfect. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that center saguaro did to get that ribbon, but it must be something pretty special. Cactus Makes Perfect. So I do have the 2 saguaro cactuses left from my set of die-cut cactuses. And, you know, a saguaro cactus has arms, So, of course, I couldn't resist, and this is our Cactivist card with our saguaro cactus holding a protest sign that says, "Don't be a prick." there's a couple of puns here. This is done exactly the same as the prickle card, with the exception that the pun sentiment is printed using the Impress BT font. The protest sign is printed with the Abadi MT Condensed X bold font. There's a mouthful for you. And I colored the sign with my Zig markers so I didn't have a black outline. Again, cut that out, leaving a little bit of a white outline. There's our Cactivist font, Impress BT. Now, I did extend the die cuts on the arms for this cactus. The actual dies stop about right there and about right there. So I completed those cuts down to the bottom of the arms just to give it a little bit more uniformity, give them a little bit more room to hang on to this sign. I die cut this main panel with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die that's 2 3/4 by 4 inches. I added a thin green frame behind that and glued them down together to a white card base. I did throw in another little pun on the inside of the card. Stick together, and perfectly appropriate for this militant expression of solidarity. I glued the sign in the saguaro's left arm and attached both of those to the card front with some foam tape. I do love this pun, or both of these, or all three of these puns. And for some reason, this feels fairly topical to me these days. Cactivist. Be a Cactivist. And there, before you know it, we've covered all of the cards made with my monthly Hero August 2022 kit. Lots of deserts this month, but I think we've got a nice variety of looks here. And I'm happy to have some real cacti in my stash now. I did manage to use almost all of the sentiments in the stamp set, really close. I really like that Luxe watercolor paper. The new core ink cubes are great, of course, and I even used that Pearl X powder almost all by itself. Featured that on one card all by itself. I'm thrilled I was able to use the stencils in a landscape mode, and I really like doubling up the buttes on the watercolor card. I think there was lots of fun to be had with this kit, and certainly a lot more variety than I initially thought. Now, this kit is still available at Hero Arts. If you're hankering for a little Western hospitality, looking for a drier climate, or just like a good cactus, grab a kit for yourself before they all sell out. If I've managed to inspire you, please use my links in the description down below when you go shopping at Hero Arts. It is always gratefully appreciated and helps support my page. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll pause for a moment of housekeeping here. I had a number of people, when I posted my redo of my craft room, I had a number of people ask me how I was storing my monthly hero kits since they started coming to us in these zip bags. These bags don't fit in the same container that the regular plastic wrapped kits did. So here's what I'm doing. I actually bought some Hero Tools large storage envelopes, and these worked great for holding everything that comes in your kit. So I'll take the card that comes in the kit, I'll add a little stick-on magnet on one side of that, add all of my die cuts to that magnet, that holds it all together. I'll put my stamp set with that. Watercolor paper left over, I'll add that to my paper. I'll add the stencils, these are all 4 of the stencils. I'll add my ink cubes to my ink stashes. I will add my little die cut guides. These are little guides I use to die cut. I thought they came in very handy, especially considering that these cactus didn't have outlines to them. I'll add these to this batch. I do have that one more small cactus left over. Add all of those, and these will all slip quite easily into this envelope. Perfect size to hold your kits, and it fits perfectly in the same size storage bin that I was using. I will put a label on the front of that that's how I'm storing, and I'm just keeping all of my zip bags separate. I'll throw a certain project in there, but I've gone to the large storage envelopes. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Thank you so much, folks. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you spend some time with me here today. Please remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, friend me, follow me, share me with all your crafty friends and enemies. And remember, don't run with scissors. I send love and light to you and yours. And as always, happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.